Started. If others join, great. And as you now know, this is being recorded, so you'll have access to this later. My name is Casey Brooks. I am a Sustainable Agriculture Educator for OEFFA. This is number 3 in our Organics 101 series. The first 2, we kind of talked about, what is organic, and then some of the other certifications that are out there that are somewhat similar. This one, I'm basically operating under the assumption that folks are like, okay, I don't like those other certifications and I want to try to pursue organic certification. So we'll go a little bit more in depth into the process. And then I'll give you some background on OEFFA and kind of what we do as well, and then look at some of the resources that are out there, both that we provide as well as ones that you can get a lot more information on just certification generally and organic production. If at any point you have a question as I'm going, just jump right in, and we'll go ahead and address those. If we need to go off on a tangent, I'm fine with that. I kind of like that. So just unmute and we'll kind of go from there. We also have on this call Jess, who is one of our events coordinators and also worked in certification for quite a while. So, and then additionally, we have John Stock, who is another sustainable ag educator. So they know certification inside and out. So if there's a question that I can't answer, they probably can. So we'll maybe lean on their resources, and who knows, maybe they'll have questions too. So we'll kind of go from there. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We'll go through this PowerPoint because I like pictures and I don't like just my face being on the screen for any longer than it has to be. So let me figure out how to do that again. All right, can everyone see that?
Yep. Yes.
Awesome. So, all right. So you're looking to get certified. How do I do this? First of all, we'll talk about OEFFA. So OEFFA was founded originally by farmers back in 1979 and has been doing organic certification since about 1981. Again, because we were founded by farmers, one of the things that we really try to focus on is helping the certification process go smoothly for sort of everyone involved. We're fortunate also that we have both a certification side or component and an education component as well. And I'll talk a little bit more why it's important that those two things are kind of separate. Overall, what we do, if you were at the other 2 workshops or watched those, you've seen this slide. We do an annual conference in February that I would highly encourage you, even if it's just for the networking opportunity, to attend at least some portion of that. It's 2 days, lots of talks, and a great networking opportunity. We do farm tours, workshops, and webinars like this one. We're a little bit more than halfway through our farm tour series as well. We do a lot of farm policy work, particularly when we are in a year like this, where it's a farm bill year, and obviously lots of interesting things going on in the world of farm policy. We have a begin farming program that we help folks in that first 10 years of farming, kind of learn the process and make it a little bit easier, hopefully, to become a farmer full-time or even part-time. And then we do organic certification and transition. So as with any other thing, organics has lots of terminology that is kind of specific to it. So we'll talk a lot about the transition process. OEFFA has been doing certification, and transition is that 3-year period that takes you from being a conventional producer to an organic producer. And I'll talk a little bit more kind of why that's a 3-year period instead of going out and getting your certification tomorrow. We've been around for quite a while, and I've worked at OEFFA in certification in the past, and then I also worked for the Texas Department of Agriculture doing certification for them. And there are definite differences between one certifier and another. So I'll talk more about that a little bit later as well. I already stressed the fact that OEFFA tries to kind of work with the farmer to help with the certification process, as opposed to being more of just a regulatory agency. And I think that's one of the keys, kind of as you're thinking about certification, is that it should be more of a partnership instead of trying to look for what you're doing wrong throughout that process. So organic certification is very much a process-based system, and not just when you're getting certified, but if you think about the whole encompassing nature of organics, it really is a process. It's not just tomorrow I'm going to go out and plant organic soybeans and everything's going to be great. It does take a little bit of time to sort of build up your repertoire of information and get your soils and your farm and know what equipment you need and all of those things. So it's a process. It does require a lot more paperwork and organization to be an effective certified operation. And John and Jess, I'm sure can reiterate this, but having all that paperwork and having everything well organized makes it so much easier through the process, both on our end, trying to review things, as well as for the farmer. I usually try to stress that even if you don't become certified organic, using some of the paperwork and some of the organizational systems that are available helps make you a better farmer and definitely a better business manager. If you don't have the paperwork, the records for what worked and what didn't, it makes it a little bit harder to kind of go back and figure out what you want to do in the future as well. It is very much a systems-based approach to farming. I like the term holistic because you're really looking at those sort of ecological interactions on the farm as a whole. My background is in ecology, so organic farming really looks at the ecology of the farm, and ideally you're going to be working with the natural system as opposed to trying to fight against it constantly, which I feel like a lot of our conventional agriculture is fighting against the natural system. You're trying to discourage all weeds. You're trying to eliminate all the bugs except for the handful of ones that you want for pollination. It's very much sort of a reactionary system, whereas in organics, generally, you're kind of looking at the big picture and figuring out how to make it work for you. And that's why it encourages that strong understanding of those ecological systems. I used to teach at a two-year school doing sustainable ag, and one of the things that I always talked about was that it's a very front-loaded system. You do a lot of the research ahead of time that kind of sets you up for success a little bit later. And it can definitely be more labor intensive, both physically as well as the time that it takes to fill out the paperwork, to be in the field, maybe hand pulling weeds as opposed to just being able to spray. Particularly in like this orchard that's pictured here, it's particularly challenging in an orchard system, for instance, because you do have so many pests that you have to deal with. And just because you're seeking organic certification doesn't mean that there aren't sprays that you can use or other products that sort of substitute for some of the conventional ones, but it might require a little bit more labor and definitely requires additional planning. All right, so where to start? One of the first things that I think, it's not terribly exciting, but looking at kind of the history of organics as a whole, the Organic Food Production Act was passed in 1990, but we didn't actually have any standards or rules until 2002. Basically, during that time period, it was kind of left up to the states to figure out, what do we want to certify as organic? What do we want to recognize? Ultimately, organic is a label. So it's a marketing idea, essentially. So because it's something that is a marketing label managed by the National Organic Program, they're very specific about what you can use and what you can't use. So the two labels that you see here, that's pretty much what you can do. So you can put a label on there using these color patterns and this exact look because that is technically the USDA certified organic label. You can say that something is, farmed organically or something along those lines, but if you use the word organic or certified organic in particular, it's got to be actually certified, and this is what you've got to do. So becoming familiar with what some of those rules are and what the standards are, I linked this NOP handbook, which we're not going to visit because it's not exciting, but it is really important to know what you can and can't do in organics. And the handbook will show whether you're producing corn or whether you're raising cattle or doesn't say anything about bees, but we won't worry about that. We'll talk about that later. It gives you the outline. So it shows you what practices are allowed, what products are allowed, and it's important to kind of familiarize yourself with it. You don't have to know it inside and out the way that a certifier would have to, but the more familiar you are with it, the fewer questions you're going to have as we start going through paperwork and working on it from that perspective. One other thing to remember is that the handbook is not set in stone. It does have the opportunity to be amended depending upon kind of what products are available. New practices can be added. The National Organic Standards Board is one of the entities that advises Secretary of Agriculture on what is allowed, and that is is it a yearly meeting, if I remember right, that they make those actual decisions. So again, you can go as deep into the weeds on that as you want, but definitely familiarize yourself with the handbook. All right, so you've read the handbook, you think it's great, sounds awesome. You've memorized all of the acronyms in all of government that will help you through this process, or not. The transition process is a challenge, especially if you've been farming conventionally for a long period of time. You do kind of have to wrap your mind around a different set of practices. It definitely is not just a substitution model. So we definitely get some calls where somebody's been farming conventionally and maybe they're doing Roundup Ready soybeans and they're used to doing routine sprays for insects, and they just want to substitute out those chemicals for organically approved chemicals. I won't say that that won't work, but it's not likely to work because, again, you're thinking of a farm holistically. It's not just, I have a problem with this particular insect and I can just, swap out a synthetic insecticide and I'm going to use neem oil instead, and it's going to take care of the problem. It doesn't really work like that. So you have to, for one, you're not allowed to use that product until you've done cultural and mechanical controls first. So that's one thing. And that, again, is looking at it from a holistic perspective. So it takes some time, and you've got to kind of know what you can and can't do before you can just kind of jump into it. There's also an economic risk. It is a little bit more labor intensive. You may have to change some of the equipment that you might have to use. Organic seed is generally more expensive than conventional seed. Some of those treatments also can be more expensive, and you're not getting the additional revenue as selling something as organic. There are some opportunities to sell transitioning grains and other products to certain buyers that will give you a little bit more money than a conventional market, but you also have to do a few other steps to get to that point. Overall, you're putting a little bit more money into it and there's some risk involved there. So just be aware that that's something that you've got to think about. Additionally, if you think about the soil that you've been working with in a conventional system, it's kind of used to a routine. You do tillage or not, or you use an herbicide. You've probably depleted a lot of the microorganisms that are in the soil. So it takes a little bit of time to get those back through additional cover crops or crop rotations, or all those other practices that are going to help build soil health. Particularly if you live in an area that the soils are already a little bit challenged, whether that's because they're wet or they're too dry or they're sandy or whatever the component is, it can be a little bit harder and maybe a little bit more time consuming to get that back. Generally, folks that have been certified organic for 5-10 years, their yields are either equal to or sometimes greater than a conventional system, as long as the soil's been cared for and overall good practices are in place. So you can expect that in year one of being certified organic, if you're used to growing, 150 bushel corn, that you're immediately going to go right back to 150 acre or 150 bushels corn. Like, it's just not likely to happen. Doesn't mean it's not possible, but not likely. So that's another thing to kind of keep in mind as a risk that's associated with this transition. Fortunately, though, there are some good resources that'll kind of help you through that process, both from a business perspective as well as from a practices perspective. So the ones that are pictured here, OEFFA does an organic transition guide and workbook that if you're interested in going through the transition process, you can contact us and we can give you a PDF of these. We don't have a whole lot of print versions left, but they're out there. This isn't like the most updated version of the organic rules. This is from, I think, 2015, 16. So most of the stuff in there is fine, but there are a few updates here and there. But something to keep in mind, you can go back to that NOP handbook if something doesn't seem to quite add up. Additionally, SARE. SARE is a fantastic resource for sort of all things sustainable agriculture. This transition business planner is great. It gives you some sample forms that are in there, some different record keeping options. And if you go to the SARE website, they have tons of information sheets, fact sheets on organic production overall. So that's another great option for resources. And both of these booklets are 60, 80 pages. They're not huge. So you can go through them in a whatever time period. It's not like they're 4-inch thick book that you need to struggle through. Additionally, and this is something that there are a number of federal programs that are providing funding for farmers that are interested in going through transition. So in order to access some of those, you have to do basically, you have to be listed in the Organic Integrity Database, which we'll talk a little bit more about here in like 2 slides. But the transitional review is something that OEFFA offers, and I would imagine there are some other certifiers out there that do something similar, where basically you pay a smaller fee, and OEFFA will give you an OSP, which there are both our version and then there's a new federal version that exists, that our certification staff will review your files before you're ready for certification. That fee will then get applied to your first year certification fee whenever that time comes, whether it's 2 years from now or 3. And we'll basically say, all right, it looks like you need to address this particular thing on your farm, or your paperwork needs to show that you're getting your seeds from this organic source, or you've searched your 3 options, or whatever might need to be addressed. We will review that, get it back to you, and can kind of work with you through that process. It's a great option, especially if you're not real sure about certification.
Hello, this is Jim Gary.
Sorry, go ahead. What was that, Jim? Okay. Again, if you guys have questions, either throw them in the chat or just unmute and ask away.
Well, they did it right away, but it wasn't very secure. And so they have another contractor coming out who's gonna do a better job securing it. I mean, for picture purposes, it probably looks fine. It's just one, it's two 4x4s and then a 2x4 on the top. The seller's husband, he's in the trades, and he thought that they might want another horizontal member.
All right.
Or,
So
halfway
hey,
down.
Jim.
So I'll check with her today to see.
Okay. Jim went back on mute. So additionally, you can get transition assistance over the phone from OEFFA or by mail. We do deal with a lot of plane producers, so they tend to communicate strictly by mail. Also an option. But John, myself, and Johnny are pretty much available every day if you need assistance, whether you decide to get certified by OEFFA or not. We're here to kind of help you through the process as well. From a funding model, NRCS, or the Natural Resource Conservation Service, has a number of programs that basically will help you get certified. Usually it works similar to other NRCS programs where you pay upfront for whatever the practice is, and then they will reimburse you for it. So one of those funding models is the Organic Transition Initiative, and that is through their EQIP program. So you can contact your local NRCS person. They will then probably schedule a farm visit. They have some paperwork that they have to work through depending upon what practices you want to use, but they will help you institute those practices in order to become certified organic within the next few years. So if, for instance, you need to do some kind of hoop house or low tunnels, or there's a pretty long list of practices that they will help fund. It's a great way to kind of take out some of that additional financial risk that comes with the transition process. Additionally, there's the Transition to Organic Partnership Program. OEFFA is one of the partners on that, along with a number of other organizations throughout the US. We're part of the Midwest Top program. And that program is great because it will set you up with a mentor that is already certified organic, can kind of help you through the process. And it's a person that you can bounce those ideas off of and not only work through paperwork, but practices and a number of other options. It also provides technical assistance from us and then our additional network of folks that are involved in organic agriculture. So another good potential funding option. I don't remember exactly what the numbers are as far as how that helps financially. And the mentor, I know, gets paid a stipend, and then the mentee gets the knowledge of the mentor. So there's that to consider as well. So the nuts and bolts of organic transition, basically it's a 3-year transition following the last application of a prohibited material. So that could be adding sewage sludge to your field to improve fertility, or it could be using Roundup to control weeds, or whatever that prohibited material is. When you have a date of that last application, that's 3 years from that date is when your organic certification can start. So you begin the transition from that point on. A lot of folks may have land that hasn't had any prohibited materials added. We especially see this with hay pastures, hay fields or pastures that, it's been essentially managed organically for, decades. Nothing's been added to it. Some of those fields can be ready for certification, in the following year. So you don't have to undergo that 3-year transition period for that particular field. You also don't have to certify your entire farm at one time. You can do sort of a phased process. We do have a lot of producers, especially it seems like larger scale, like row crop farmers, folks that are doing grain, tend to do, 100 acres here, 200 acres there, or, 10, 15, whatever the scale is, that they'll kind of phase in that process. That reduces your risk, but it makes it a lot harder from a paperwork perspective because you have to keep basically everything separate. All of your conventional agriculture, all of your organic ag, it all has to be separate, both from a record keeping perspective as well as like physically separate. You got to clean the equipment anytime you go from one field to the other. So something to consider whenever you're transitioning. There's more risk if you do the whole farm, but it's easier in the sense of trying to keep track of what's going where and cleaning and all that fun stuff. And that's crops. Animals get really complex depending upon what type of animal that you're raising. So poultry, for instance, basically manage organic from no later than the second day of life. So basically if you order in chickens, which we have backyard chickens, we got them in on day one. So basically they were hatched, they shipped them out, we got them the second day. They've only received organic feed their entire existence, then they can be certified organic. If you don't get them until day 4 and they've gotten some conventional stuff, then they can no longer be certified organic for poultry. Dairy animals, you can do a one-time transition of a conventional herd. And that can be challenging also. But basically those animals, after 1 year of transition, the milk that they produce can be certified organic. The animals, however, won't be allowed slaughter eligibility, so they won't be certified organic meat. But the next generation, so your breeder stock or any offspring, as long as they are managed organic for the last third of gestation, then they can be certified organic. So that's going to apply to dairy animals, beef animals, technically pigs, all of those things. Any questions about anything thus far? I know I'm going through tons of information. All good? Okay. So those are 2 of the scopes. We'll talk more about, scopes of organic certification a little bit later. The next step that I highly encourage, so you've done kind of your baseline research, you've read through the NOP handbook, thought about, what works on your farm, what fields maybe that you want to certify. I would highly encourage you to contact a certifier. Doesn't mean you have to choose that particular certifier, but start the process of just kind of reaching out. There are a couple of different ways you can find who certifies in your area. You can look on the Organic Integrity database, and that I think is a great resource kind of just generally because the Organic Integrity database lists not only certifiers, of which there are about 70, give or take, it also will show you farms that are certified organic. So if you've gone to your local farmer's market and so-and-so farm says that they have organic produce, they don't say that they're certified, you can technically go to the Organic Integrity database and double check. Type in the farm name, search by state, you can search by certifier, products. It's a really good resource to kind of look at all things kind of on the background of organic. And you can look at particular certifiers that certify in your area. So if you click on OEFFA, it's going to show the states that we certify folks in. And I'll show you a slide that is a little bit more specific, but just for OEFFA. I'm not going to talk about, OTCO or any of the other certifiers that are out there. But there are a lot of good certifiers, and pretty much everywhere that you are going to have a few options to certify your particular farm. Also, I don't know how much folks have played around on the USDA websites generally. They're generally kind of awful to navigate. They've got great information, but they're sometimes hard to find. But you can go to this certifier page, and that will also list those same certifying agents. So it's all USDA one way or the other, but both of these are good resources to kind of pick out some of those possible certifiers that are out there. All right, so you've talked to a certifier, at least gotten a little bit of information. You will have seen the different certification scopes when you looked at the NOP handbook, but consider which ones that you actually want to do. So crop is going to involve any kind of vegetable production, basically. So if you're raising corn, tomatoes, industrial hemp, whatever it is, that falls under the crop scope. Wild crop is not necessarily cultivated. So you're going out into the woods and you are collecting golden seal, which is a whole nother thing. It's highly involved. Or if you're doing mushrooms, technically that would fall under a wild crop category, or ramps. Not as many people get this certification, but it exists as its own separate scope. Livestock, basically anything other than bees. Bees are, there isn't actually a standard. You might see certified organic honey out there, and this is one of the things that we'll talk about when we're looking at choosing a certifier. There's a different interpretation of kind of how it's specified. So OEFFA does not certify honey, partly because there isn't a set standard for it. But some people do certify bees and honey generally under the livestock category. And then handling is any kind of post-harvest processing. Whether you're repackaging and selling it to Whole Foods, or you're roasting coffee, any of that will fall under the handling scope. And there are a lot of folks that will have all four of these, or just one or two of the components. So figuring out what you want to do, what you want to sell, what you want to do with your products is a part of this process. So OEFFA specifically, this is the region that we cover. And just to give you an idea of what it will cost you, and the cost varies significantly depending upon what certifier you go with. But when you do reach out and contact a certifier, these are some of the things that you should definitely consider and ask. So we cover a 12-state region, although technically we have a few farms that we certify outside of this service area. Some of that's because it was a long time ago and there weren't very many certifiers. So we were like, sure, you're in South Dakota, we'll certify you. Why not? But keep in mind, if you are farther away from Ohio, it will probably cost you a little bit more. And that's mostly because to inspect the farm, which does happen every year, we've got to send somebody there. So if you're in South Dakota, it's a little bit harder for somebody that's based in Columbus to get out there. So one of the things to consider. So about $1,275 is the current cost. So this is as of this past year. Costs always change. So generally they tend not to go down. They tend to increase. But this is roughly the range that you would expect. Once you're certified in crop, and almost every, I can't think of a farm that isn't certified in both crop and livestock. Basically, if you have livestock, you have to have land. So part of the standard requires that you have a certain amount of outside space or pasture that your livestock can then access. So you would have to certify your land, in which case the crop would be pasture or hay or whatever. So once you're certified in crop, you can add livestock. Handling is based on gross organic sales. So that could be, your fee could be very affordable, or if you're a really successful organic handler, then it will be more expensive. So it just kind of varies. the beauty of all of these programs is that there is a cost share program that exists. And this is a federal cost share program. Yeah, go ahead, Kim.
I have a question. So you can't be, according to what you said, you would, if you want livestock certification, you also have to have crop certification, or I'm just a little confused by your statement.
Yes, yeah, I went through it really fast, so sorry. So if you have cattle, for instance, one of the requirements in the certification program is that those cattle have to get at least 30% of their food from pasture during the grazing season. So you would have to have certified organic ground or pasture that then they could graze on. The same is true even if you have broilers that are mostly in a barn, they also have to have access to grass. They have to have outdoor access. So even if it's only a few acres, it's still ground that would be considered certified organic ground. So the crop in those cases would be pasture.
Okay, so just because I'm interested in certifying for broilers, actually.
Okay.
So in that case, what would my cost be? Would it be the sort of like the crop cost plus the livestock cost?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and again, it can all be confusing because there are multiple layers that kind of go along with it. But yeah, if you're looking at broilers, definitely take some time to look at the space requirements for both indoor and outdoor access. That tends to be one of the biggest challenges with livestock generally, is that they do have certain requirements that you have to meet in order to have enough space. And that obviously factors into size of a barn or size of a structure that you might have for that livestock. The cost share program currently is a 75% up to $750 per scope. So depending upon what certifier you go with, that can change the price pretty significantly. So for instance, with the minimum fee there for crop, that would drop you from $12.75 down to $5.25, which is great. So one of the things to consider. And that's wrapped into the Farm Bill currently. So one of the things that, going back to that farm policy component, ideally there would be 100% cost share that you're already paying into this tax base to fund the USDA. It'd be great if your organic fees were kind of wrapped into that process. But right now, 75%. So that's what we're looking at. And OEFFA is for Ohio at least, we manage that cost share program. Most other states, it's done through your farm service agency. And additionally, you don't have to go through OEFFA. If you're in Ohio, you can go to your local FSA office and they will administer the cost share also.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I'm in Michigan. So it would be, the 1450, and there's a certain reimburse or cost share for that, and then it would be 550, with that cost share. And I'm sort of here wearing two hats today because I have a farm where I'm interested in transitioning to organic, but I'm also working with the Michigan TOP program.
Oh, great.
And just so I'm kind of I'm double dipping, I suppose, for this webinar too.
No, that's great.
But one thing that we're interested in doing is possibly encouraging some other meat processors in Michigan to consider organic certification, which would fall under the handling. And so if you have, say, a new somebody like signing up, we've never had organic certification for meat processing at our plant, but we're interested in exploring it, how do you determine the cost for that? Because they don't have a history of gross organic sales.
Right. So it would be based on the estimate for that coming year.
Okay.
And our current like scale is $0 to $50,000. Gross sales pays like the minimum fee, which I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but it's $500 or $600. It's not a lot for that lowest tier. But yeah, that's fantastic, because meat processing is by far one of the biggest challenges with livestock production, is that there just are very, very few meat processors out there.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so we've looked at costs and potential options that are out there. The process itself, I realize it's taken me a little while to get to the process, but this is where things can get a little bit more challenging, I guess, depending upon how much you like to do paperwork or not. So basically, you choose your certifier, fill out an organic system plan, which I'll show you a sample of that. Your file will then be reviewed, and an inspection will be scheduled. So every certified operation gets inspected every year. That's the way the system is set up. So you go through this, pay a fee. You might not necessarily fill out your whole organic system plan every year. Our organic system plan is about 20 pages for the first time, and then it's only 8 pages that you have to update in subsequent years. So depends on the certifier as far as that goes. So basically, you turn that in, your file gets reviewed. You then will schedule an inspection. An inspector, whether it's a staff inspector or a contract inspector, will come out. We'll go through your paperwork on the farm, make sure that everything that you're saying on paper matches up with what you're doing in the field. The file from the inspector will send an inspection report back to the certifier. That'll get reviewed again. And then as long as everything looks good, they'll make a certification decision and you will be certified organic. That's the very simple part of that process. In general, this process should take 3 to 4 months, depending upon if there are any issues, scheduling problems, any of that kind of stuff. Sometimes it does take longer. A lot of certifiers are still behind from the pandemic because we couldn't do in-person inspections, and it was a lot more challenging to do pretty much all of this stuff. So I think most of us are caught up, but still, one of the things to keep in mind, it does take time. It's not an overnight process. So I'm going to go through that list a little bit more in depth, and then we'll take a little bit of time for questions here at the end as well. So choosing a certifier. This is probably one of the hardest decisions, I think, of this process. And there's nothing that says that, you know, you can't go with Oregon Tilth this year and then, you know, something goes well or you hear good things about somebody else and you can switch. You don't want to switch regularly because different paperwork and different challenges, and it gets ugly. So I would encourage you, before you choose that certifier, contact at least 3, kind of the same way that if you were, you know, getting your roof redone, you should contact 3 roofers to get some quotes, because prices are going to be different. Paperwork's going to be generally different. Even if we're all kind of working from the same rules, we're going to use different forms and different things to kind of work through that. So when you talk to the certifier, ask for a sample OSP so you can look at, you know, how easily are these questions laid out. Is it 50 pages? Is it 10 pages? Ask lots of questions. This is the opportunity for you to basically interview that certifier and find out if they should get your business. Because ultimately, whether we're a nonprofit, or the certifier is a nonprofit like we are, or whether they're a for-profit certifier, their objective is to help you through this process, and they still want your money. Like, that's part of the part of the deal with this. So make sure that you're spending that money wisely and get all of your questions answered, because invariably you're going to have questions along the way through the certification process that you're going to want to know that that certifier is willing to answer and willing to work with you through that process. And don't rush the decision. Like, you've already maybe contacted some certifiers before just to get info and do some reconnaissance. You technically have 3 years of that transition process before you have to make a decision. So take your time, do your research, talk to as many people, go on that organic integrity database and maybe contact somebody that's certified by OEFFA or certified by GOA or whatever certifiers you're considering. Find out if they're willing to answer these questions, find out what their experience is like. Generally, folks in the organic community are pretty open to helping other folks that are interested in becoming certified organic. And for instance, Kim participating in the top program, you've got, you know, the potential for mentors, you've got people to ask these questions. Go to events like farm tours, where you're going to be around some other certified folks and ask them who certifies them. It's a great way to kind of get a little bit more information and make a wise decision. I also threw in this last little bit, the same rules, different interpretations. I was talking before about how some certifiers will certify honey. Some will certify hydroponic production. Even though there is the NOP handbook and there are set rules, there are what we call gray areas in those rules where it can be interpreted one way or another because there isn't something that says you must do this thing or you can't do that thing. That was one of the I don't know, biggest challenges whenever I was initially hired to do organic certification, is figuring out, you know, what do we do in those particular gray areas? And that's where, like, working with your certifier to figure out, you know, what works, what that certifier is what their guidance is for a particular practice. So that's one important consideration as you're choosing your certifier. Everyone's favorite part, filling out your organic system plan. So some parts of the organic system plan are pretty straightforward. It's, you know, address, contact information, what you're growing, all that fun stuff, crop summaries, those kinds of things. Most of that is pretty straightforward. If at any point you have any questions about what a question is asking you, or what you think you should potentially put in a particular space, contacting your certifier is a good option. However, if you say, what do I need to put on line, you know, 22, the certifier can't actually tell you you should put this on line 22. They might re-ask the question in a different way so that it kind of leads you to that particular answer. But part of the rules, part of the National Organic Program rules, is that your certifier, the person actually doing the certification, can't basically create an advantage for one producer over another. So if whoever your certification specialist is that's reviewing your file, you call them and they go through every question and tell you, you know, in order to comply, answer this way, this way, that way. That's completely illegal and that can't be done. What they can do is say, you know, on question 22, a lot of our producers might say this, or they might answer that. Excuse me. So it's offering some guidance, but not actually answering the question for you. The difference is some certifiers do have, I mentioned OEFFA has a certification side and an education side. So John and I are sustainable ag educators. We work for OEFFA, but we don't actually make any certification decisions. So we can go through anyone's OSP line by line and basically say, all right, you know, you've told me before that you do this, so put this in that line. We can walk through that whole process. And there are a number of other certifiers that have that as well. And I think that's a very helpful component of certification to be able to have that person that says, this, I don't understand this question, and what in the world should I put down here? We can kind of help you through that a little bit more. And again, even if you're not certifying with OEFFA, you can still call us and we'll help you with, you know, PCO or NOFA New York or whoever. We'll help you through that process, because it's, you know, the more certified organic folks out there, the better. Okay, so, and this isn't just for this presentation, be patient. I'm sorry if I'm long-winded, but through the certification process, be patient. It does take time. If you're a new producer, usually you receive priority. So your file will get reviewed a little bit faster. If for whatever reason, though, you don't hear anything, you know, you turn in your OSP in January or February and you hear nothing until April, it's okay to call. You know, call us in March and say, hey, I noticed your deadline passed. Just want to know where my file is in the process. One of us can look it up, tell you, all right, we've checked it in and it's being reviewed, or we haven't gotten to it yet, but you know, there are options. But be patient. It does take a little while. Have some coffee, go for a wagon ride, you know, whatever you need to do. That'd be a really long wagon ride if it was from like February through March, but you get it. Be patient through the process. Preparing for an inspection. I think this is one of the more stressful parts of organic certification because, especially as farmers, yes, we like to share what we're doing, but at the same time, we don't want people like scrutinizing and questioning what's going on the farm. And that's kind of what an inspection is. It is someone that is in a somewhat regulatory position coming to your farm and saying, you know, why are your cattle muddy up to their knees? Or why does this field look like it has, you know, this crop in it and your OSP says it has something else? It really is an opportunity, though, for you to have somebody that knows organic farming very well come to the farm and kind of work through this process with you. Again, they can't offer any advice. They're not actually making any certification decisions. They are acting as the eyes of the organization that they are working for. So if the OEFFA inspector is out there, they're basically just looking at, this is what you said on paper, this is what it looks like in the field. I'm going to write that down and I'm going to share it with you as well. At the end of every inspection, there should be a sort of a debriefing, an exit interview as it's known, to make sure that if you have any questions that they're addressed, and if there are any concerns that you're aware of it, it's being written down, it's being put into your inspection report, and then it will go back to OEFFA. To prepare for that inspection, first and foremost, organize your paperwork. You know, any record keeping that you have, whether it's field history sheets, whether it's the seed searches that you've done, seed tags, any products that you might have used on the fields, organize all that stuff, have it ready, you know where it is. Not only does it help speed your inspection along, but it also shows that you are organized and you're prepared, and overall you're, you know, a good organic farmer because you've got all that information kept. If there is specific documentation that you might need, so for seeds, for instance, if you can't find organic seed, which happens, you have to be able to show that you've done a sufficient seed search. So if I wanted to buy organic clover and all I did was go to Tractor Supply, walk the shelves, and not see organic clover, that's not really sufficient. They're not really a place that typically is going to have much organic clover, if any at all. You have to check in at least 3 sources, and you have to look. Well, the reasons that you can use non-organic seed is if they don't have the quality, quantity, or form that you want. That's one of those kind of gray areas where ideally you'd be able to find organic seed anywhere and get as much as you want in whatever variety you want. But sometimes that doesn't happen. Less of an issue now than it used to be, but still make sure you have that documentation that you've done that seed source search. Through this process, the inspector is going to contact you to set up an interview, set up your inspection. Ideally, you know, you're looking to set up that inspection so that it works best for everybody involved. At your farm, set up a good location to go through everything. If we're, you know, sitting out in pasture with all your paperwork sort of spread out in front of you, maybe not a great location. Same if it's in your vegetable plot. You know, take a spot in the barn, take a spot in, you know, I've done inspections where I'm literally at the kitchen table, you know, going through paperwork and kind of checking everything out on the paperwork side first. The inspector is going to want to walk the fields, going to want to see the farm. Try to minimize your distractions as well. So, you know, in the dairy barn while milking's going on, yes, it works. We can do it, but it's going to take more time. It's going to be more challenging to do an effective inspection for both parties, because you're going to be distracted by what's going on, and potentially the inspector is going to be distracted too. Also, ask questions. As many as you want. Again, the key is that you feel comfortable with the inspector and through the inspection process. Again, they're not going to be able to give you advice other than, you know, maybe you should keep this paperwork or that paperwork. They're not going to be able to give you like agronomic advice in that situation, because that would be showing an advantage for producer, even though they know it. So that's one of the things to consider. Ideally, depending upon the complexity of your operation, the inspection should take 1 to 4 hours. There are exceptions. Sometimes it could take longer if you have numerous fields sort of spread throughout a larger area, and you know, generally the farmers or the inspector is going to want to see all of those fields. If especially some of the larger handlers, that can be a longer process. If you're a really small operation, 1 to 2 hours is more than sufficient to kind of go through all that paperwork, tour the farm, do everything that needs to be done. I did an inspection in West Virginia that was literally 3 acres of squash. It was like 3 different varieties of squash. We could stand on the hill, see the whole 3 acres of the field. It took me like 3 times as long to get down there as it did to actually do the inspection. That's kind of the way it works sometimes. I've had another inspection that was a dairy that had 21 different fields spread throughout like basically 2 counties. And that one was, you know, 4.5 hours. So make sure that you're budgeting that kind of time. And again, once the inspection is completed, the inspector is going to fill out their inspection report, go through that exit interview with you, and send all that information into the office. And again, be patient. This last step of the process probably takes a little bit longer because we've had to work through all of the first files, take some time, go on a vacation, don't worry about your file. Once you start to get to the point that you have organic products that you need to sell, or you're getting close to, you know, a couple weeks out from having to sell something as certified, make sure you're contacting your inspector. That's the time, or not your inspector, excuse me, your certifier, because you can't sell anything organic as organic until you have that certificate in hand. So be patient, but keep that in mind that, you know, we're all under a time crunch. So it's okay to call, ask questions, check on the status of your application. And then hopefully everything goes well and you can celebrate. You would then be certified organic. The things that can delay this process are if you don't have all your paperwork filled out correctly, proper documentation can sometimes be a challenge. So occasionally the certifier will call and ask you for more information. That can kind of stretch it out a little bit longer. But like I said, most certifiers are going to say 3 to 4 months is kind of your average time period from the time we get your OSP to the time that you actually get your organic certificate. Another thing to remember is that once you get your certificate, that certificate is good until you get another one. So even if it's been over a year since you got a certificate, that previous one is still good. You're still certified organic, nothing has lapsed, it doesn't expire. Ideally, you're going to get a new one in a timely fashion at roughly the same time every year. And if your crops change throughout that time period, you're going to want to get an organic certificate that has the crop or livestock or whatever listed on it. You can't sell anything, even if your whole farm is certified organic, you've got to list the actual products that are on your OSP. That's what gets listed on your certificate as well. Remember too that this is a partnership. It isn't just you turn in paperwork and your certifier says yes or no. It involves a number of different people through this process. So it's you all as a farmer, it involves the inspectors, the certifier, educators like myself, anybody that's actually buying the products. They need to have a copy of your organic certificate. They need to know what the supply and demand is and who to contact and so on and so forth. Input dealers. It's really, really important that before you use any input, anything that you're going to put on your property, on your crops, anything else, that you're sure that it's something you can use. And you can always call your certifier or call an educator to find out if this is an approved input. And we'll often get calls from input dealers that want to know, how do I get my product on the list for what's allowed? That's the whole other thing. And then agency staff. So working with NRCS, working with FSA, the various other acronyms that are out there, your local soil and water. It's important that everyone through this whole process understands what the standards are, what can and can't be done, used, because there are challenges along each one of these different steps. And I used this slide in the first presentation. I might use it in the last one too. I don't remember. It's all starting to blur together. But the real key with this, I asked, what does organic mean? And I think the reality is, what does it mean to you? Why are you getting certified? It's not just a marketing thing. If you really want to be certified organic and do it long term, you kind of have to buy into the system as a whole. So depending on who you talk to, yes, you can do it just for the financial gains. And there are plenty of people that are out there that are just going to do it for that. But I think to be really successful and to do it long term, you have to understand your land. You have to understand the crops that you're growing, the livestock that you're raising, your handling process, whatever it is. And that will make you a better farmer or handler, and will also make the certification process much, much easier throughout the whole range of steps and duration that it takes. Because the more you understand, the more you kind of buy into the organic system. It isn't just a label, it really is a process, a holistic way of looking at farming. Right now, we only represent about 2% of all farming, but it's rapidly growing. As it says there at the bottom, it's a $60 billion a year industry, and that has continued to grow throughout the time of certification. Ohio is currently 6th, I think, for most organic farms. And again, this is kind of dated information because this is 2017. I haven't updated it because it's a lot of information to go through. But we certify about 60% of the farms in Ohio. Overall, again, certified organic farms have steadily increased, with the exception of during COVID. There are a few that kind of dropped out of the system that are coming back on now. But there's always that opportunity for growth, and the organic industry as a whole has continued to grow throughout this whole time period. All right, that was a ton of information. And as I said before, you can always call us for additional information. John and I are ready to answer phones pretty much all the time. You can also go to your local NRCS office. Again, whether it's to access those Organic Transition Initiative funds or some of the other funding opportunities that they have. FSA is another good source, both for cost share word that I can't say right now. OTCO, Oregon TILF is another certifier that has tons of good educational information. You can go to their website. They have lots of good fact sheets. OEFFA obviously does too. Oregon TILF is a bigger organization, so a little bit more resources, but some good stuff out there. SARE, I mentioned before, great resource. NCAT and ATRA, they have some fantastic webinars and lots of really, really good information on sustainable agriculture as a whole, as well as organic specifically. The Rodale Institute has some wonderful technical service providers, assistance that is also available, similar to OEFFA. They are throughout the country, and they also have a research farm. They have a few research farms, but they have one that's been comparing conventional agriculture to organic agriculture for the past 30 plus years. So it's a really telling comparison, the differences that they've gotten in those plots. So I highly encourage you to check out Rodale's website. They've got great webinars and field days and all that stuff too. And you can always go to your local extension agent. Central State University and Ohio State are our land grant institutions in Ohio. Kim, Michigan, you're already involved with TOP, so Michigan State is your primary contact up there. There are lots of other bits of information out there on organics. I highly encourage you to do tons of research ahead of time, and then you can always ask some of these folks as kind of things go on. It'll make the whole process easier, especially if you're one of those people that's like a complete geek for this information, like I am. The more I can kind of cram into my brain, the better overall. As I said, if you have any questions, you're welcome to give us a call, send me an email. Our general education line is there, that 614 number, and then you can call me on my cell, which is pretty much always with me. And feel free to ask questions throughout that process. Whether you go with OEFFA or not, you're welcome to give us a call. Thank you very much for listening to me through this whole process. Do you all have any questions that I can answer while we're here? Anything I can do to expand on this if I haven't?
Hi, my name is Roman Karaman. I had a question that you may or may not know the answer to, but I figured I'd go on ahead and ask.
Great.
On the organic integrity database, whenever you like pull the list of certified organic whatever's everything, it has like optional, I guess, check boxes, and some of them it looks like nobody ever checks. Is that like due to the organic certifiers having their own forms? Do you know how that works? Like, for example, dairy, it says yes, as applicable, but then not a single operation has dairy on any download I ever make. Check their yes or marked. In particular, I work with AMS, USDA, Agricultural Marketing Service, as a market news reporter. So nothing with the National Organic Program, but I look for organic dairies, and it'd be a lot simpler if I could just look down that list of organic dairies there based on them being checked. And I wasn't sure if y'all knew why they would not, or why, I guess that's there, but then it's never actually there.
So if we're looking for a dairy, usually what I would do on the organic integrity database is when you go over on the right side for the certified products, I type in dairy there, or type in milk. And then it will show basically everyone that is certified for dairy.
All right. Thank you. Sorry, I was just trying to figure it out.
No, it's okay. As with many USDA forms, it can be challenging, as you know.
Yeah.
So there's so many different search options on there. Yeah, it makes sense that there could be challenges with that.
Yeah, and like you said, our websites, all of the USDA websites are terrible to search. Often I call people with different USDA programs just to ask, because I have trouble finding things, you know, and it's, you know, because I work with the USDA, I'm just like, well, if I can't find something like with NAS, the National Agricultural Statistics Service, I just call them, and you know, that works for me because I work for them and I'm comfortable doing that. But, you know, the general public's probably not. And it's, you know, I figured you guys might have more insight on searching the organic integrity database than, you know, I would just trying to pull it up just now. I was having some trouble. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, we need your list of people to call whenever we have questions about these things.
Yeah. Sure. Feel free to reach out to me anytime.
Nice. Yeah, so the organic integrity database does have just a wealth of information. And we do, like, we'll get calls of somebody that's in a particular area that, hey, I want to find somebody that sells, you know, broccoli in this particular region. So we do have to do these searches probably more than the average person. So
yeah, well, and I had moved out to Ohio. I relocated here from Wisconsin, and I was like, well, let me see if I can find any organic dairies that I can visit, or see if I can tour any. And you know, I first tried searching there and just downloaded the like full list that they have, and was like, oh, this is not simple. Just doing Control F or going down that dairy tab, and was like, all right, well, I need to figure out how I'm going to do this. And I made a table and tried filtering and just ended up with way too many options. And so I kind of gave up at the time. And, you know, we had this discussion and you brought up the database. So I figured I'd ask you.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, Kim had a good suggestion there too, like putting it into Excel and searching, which it sounds like you've done. Additionally, at least Ohio specific, and some of the other certifiers may have this, but we have something called a Good Earth guide, which is currently in the process of being updated. But if you go to the OEFFA website, the Good Earth guide has folks that have chosen to list their particular products around Ohio, kind of similar to what is it? It's not Local Roots, it's local something or other that you can search for farms that are in your area. So other options.
Awesome. Thank you.
Any other questions from anybody?
So I have a question, and part of why I wanted to listen in on this is just I am considering OEFFA to be our certifier because you know, you have an excellent reputation amongst the farmers that I know. On the other hand, OEFFA is one of the more expensive certifiers, and I'm just wondering, you know, do you have a sense of why certifiers vary so much in terms of their costs? And is there something like, what does OEFFA offer that, say, I wouldn't get from, I don't know, Oregon Tilth that might be less expensive?
Yeah. That's one of the, like, you know, big picture question issues, because in general, you know, as with any other employer, we're trying to attract people and pay them a living wage and benefits and all those fun things. Certifiers generally have a difficult time retaining staff. So one of the reasons that you see some certifiers, you know, paying a little bit more or sometimes less than others is based on that sort of that balance sheet. Most OEFFA is a nonprofit, so our overall objective is to break even every year. So the challenge of balancing additional costs, unfortunately, has come to the prices sort of generally getting a little bit higher. If you look at certifiers across the country, we're somewhere in the middle overall. I don't know the fees for every entity, and it does vary depending upon the farm size as well. OEFFA is a little bit more expensive, partly because we do a flat fee model. So whether you're 5 acres or whether you're 1,000 acres as a crop producer, you're paying the same base fee. A lot of other certifiers will do it based on acreage. Some do it based on your sales. So it depends on what kind of model that those particular certifiers decide to use. We understand that like that flat fee generally hurts the smaller producers. And that's why we try to push that cost share, being a higher amount than it is currently. But being able to predict what you have to pay in the coming year is one of the reasons, and we hear from a lot of farmers that like they like knowing I've got $1,500 that I've got to set aside to pay my fees. That predictability is sometimes appreciated. So something to consider when you're looking at certifiers is, what is my actual fee going to be? Second is OTCO, for instance, similar to OEFFA, it's a similar structure. As I said, they're bigger. They certify more than twice as many farms as we do. I think they're like over 3,000. We're somewhere around 1,000. Last I remember. But as far as like what they offer, they have a certification component, they have an education component. They're very similar as far as the structures of the organizations. And fee-wise, it's not a huge difference. They're in Oregon, we're in Ohio. Whether, I don't know if that matters, it's partly why I said, do your research, contact multiple certifiers, talk to them, figure out kind of what works best for you. And as you said, you've talked to other folks that are certified by different entities. I do feel like when I worked for Texas Department of Ag, for instance, their lowest fee was only $200 per year, which is great for the producer, but that also puts a lot more weight on having more handlers. Generally, handlers pay higher fees. They also make a whole lot more money most of the time. So in Texas, it was a 50-50 ratio. Half of the folks were farms, half of the folks were handlers that we certified, and the handlers were what funded our program. The farmers, other than a few that were behemoth farmers, that it really didn't add up. It wasn't necessarily an equal component there. So it can sometimes encourage the certifier to go after handler fees more than working with farmers. And since OEFFA is a farmer-based organization, that's kind of the direction that we tend to go. I think last count we were right around 100 handlers and 800, 900 farmers. So that changes your fee structure sometimes too. But great question. Anything else? All right. Well, thank you very much for taking the time out of your day. Hopefully you get the opportunity to go outside and enjoy some of this awesome weather that we're having, at least. Hopefully, wherever you are, your weather's great too. I'm looking forward to not being inside very soon. So thank you again. If you have any questions, again, feel free to contact me, check out the OEFFA website, and do your research before you certify. And hopefully we'll talk to you all again. So thank you again very much.
Thank you, Casey. Have a good one.
Thanks.